I used to think the worst day of my life was when my adoptive parents got on a stage and mocked me in front of our entire town. The air crackled with polite applause and nervous laughter, and every single sound felt like a needle poking my skin. I felt my soul just shrink down to the size of a pebble, heavy and useless inside my chest. But I was wrong. The worst day of their lives happened a week later, in a dead-silent courtroom, when the truth I'd found made the judge himself tremble. My name is Anna. For 6 years, starting when I was 16, I'd been Anna Hudson. Before that, I was Anna Vance, a name that felt like a ghost from a life I could barely remember. The Hudsons, Tom and Sarah, were basically the king and queen of our town, Maple Creek. Their name was on plaques everywhere, the library, the hospital, you name it. They were philanthropists and socialites, and to everyone else, they were saints. They had built this empire on looking generous, and I was their crown jewel, the little black girl they had rescued from foster care. I was 10 when they adopted me. I still remember walking into their huge colonial house, with its shiny hardwood floors and ceilings so high they seemed to scrape the sky. It was a palace compared to the string of temporary rooms I'd known. Sarah Hudson, with her perfect blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, knelt down and told me, "This is your forever home now, Anna. We're going to give you a life your parents never could have." Even then, at 10, her words felt less like a promise and more like a deal. I wasn't a daughter. I was a project, their greatest act of charity. The first few years were a blur of them trying to remake me. They replaced my clothes, corrected how I talked, and handpicked my hobbies. I loved to draw, sketching people in a worn-out notebook I'd had for years. But one afternoon, Sarah found it and swapped it for a set of brand-new canvases and oil paints, telling me that's what real artists used. My little sketches were too raw, too real for their perfect world. Those oil paints stayed in the box, untouched. Tom loved to joke about my past at his dinner parties. "You should have seen her when we first got her," he'd laugh to his rich friends. "Ate with her hands, scared of her own shadow. We've worked wonders." They'd all chuckle, and Sarah would pat my hand. It was supposed to look like affection, but it always felt like she was holding me in place. They never used slurs or called me names outright. Their brand of cruelty was sneakier, like a slow-acting poison made of 1,000 little cuts. It was in the way they'd tell me to tame my hair. It was the surprise in their voices when I did well in my honors classes. "You're so articulate, Anna," Sarah would say, as if she expected me to be anything but. I was their walking billboard for how good and kind they were. I learned to be quiet, polite, and grateful. I learned to make myself smaller to fit into the box they'd built for me. And God, the loneliness was a physical weight, a constant echo in that huge, empty house. I was always on display, but I had never felt more invisible. The main event for them every year was the Hudson Gala, for their charity, the Hudson Project for the Underprivileged. Its purpose was always kind of vague, something about helping at-risk youth. But what it really did was give them an excuse to throw the biggest party of the year. Everyone who was anyone would be there. This year the theme was A Story of Hope, and I was supposed to be the star. Sarah had told me about it a month before. "Anna, darling," she'd cooed, "we want to honor you at the gala this year. You're our story of hope." For a split second, I actually felt a flicker of warmth. I let myself believe they finally saw me, that they were proud. So I agreed. They bought me a custom silk gown. It was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. The night of the gala, the ballroom looked like a dream, with crystal chandeliers and flowers everywhere. I felt like a princess, but a knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. The Hudsons worked the room, soaking up praise and donations while I trailed a step behind. "This is our Anna," Tom would say, resting his hand on my shoulder. "Our greatest success story." Then it was time for the speech. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit Tom and Sarah on stage. They were total pros. They talked about giving back, and the crowd hung on every word. Then Sarah's voice rang out. "Tonight we want to share a very personal story. Anna, darling, would you please join us?" My heart hammered as I walked up those steps. I stood between them, blinded by the light. Tom put an arm around me, and I knew it was just for the audience. "When we first met Anna 6 years ago," he started, his voice dripping with fake emotion, "she was a different person. Lost, quiet, and a little feral." A few people in the front row snickered. My smile froze. Sarah took over, her voice light and teasing. "Oh, Tom, be nice. But he's right. We had to teach her everything. You wouldn't believe the things she used to do. She'd hide food under her mattress. Can you imagine? A whole sleeve of crackers." The crowd laughed louder this time. The sound hit me like a slap. I stared at Sarah, begging her with my eyes to stop, but she was playing to the room, her face glowing with all the attention. And the way she talked. Tom boomed, jumping back in. Then he did it. He put on this crude, exaggerated voice, pretending to be a scared little kid. "Me no wanna go," he mimicked, pouting his face. The laughter was a roar now. It washed over me, drowning me. They weren't honoring me. They were putting me on display for their own sick entertainment. They were mocking the scared, orphan child I used to be, all for a round of applause. Standing there in that spotlight, I felt every bit of warmth just drain out of the world. It was a cold, clinical humiliation. I could see the faces in the crowd. Some looked uncomfortable, sure, but most were smiling, entertained by the rich couple and their little charity case. I wasn't a person. I was a story. Prop. A punchline, and my eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. A scream was building in my chest, but I choked it down. Without a word, I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't run. I walked with this strange, chilling calm, right past the tables of stunned guests, through the ballroom doors, and out into the cold night. The worst part wasn't the mockery. It was the crushing realization that hit me. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was a performance, and I was the joke. Something inside me had just shattered. Or maybe something had finally broken free. The drive home was silent. Not the peaceful kind, but the loud, ringing kind where unspoken anger hangs in the air. The second we walked in the door, Sarah turned on me, her face a mask of cold fury. "You embarrassed us, Anna," she snapped. "You were supposed to be grateful. Instead, you acted like a spoiled brat." Tom just shook his head, looking at me with pure disappointment, as if my pain was just an annoying inconvenience for him. "We give you everything," he said. "And this is how you repay us." There was no apology, no regret. To them, my humiliation was my fault for being too sensitive. That night, the gilded cage finally felt like a prison. I locked myself in my room, where the silence of the house just screamed how alone I was. They left me alone for the next few days. I guess they figured I'd eventually crawl back and say I was sorry. But it was during this Cold War that everything changed. I was in Tom's home office, a room I was never allowed in. I wasn't even looking for anything, just hiding. I reached for a heavy art book on a high shelf, but my hand slipped and knocked over a decorative box next to it. It hit the floor with a loud thud, spilling papers all over the rug. My heart jumped into my throat. I knelt down to quickly shove everything back in, expecting old receipts or something. Instead, my eyes landed on a document in a formal blue cover. The last will and testament of David and Eleanor Vance. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The legal language was thick, but I scanned the pages, and my world started to spin. Our beloved daughter, Anna Vance, sole heir. A substantial trust to be established for her care. Underneath it was another folder. Anna Vance Trust, Annual Statements. Pulled one out. It was from some big law firm I'd never heard of. I stared at columns of numbers, my brain struggling to understand what they meant. There were millions of dollars in this trust. Millions. And then I saw the withdrawals. Huge, regular payments made out to Thomas and Sarah Hudson, guardians. The description read, "For the care, upbringing, and education of Anna Vance." The amounts were insane, way more than they ever spent on me. I saw withdrawals that lined up perfectly with when they bought their new luxury car. Another huge withdrawal was dated just a month before they made a massive, very public donation to the hospital. I just sat there on the floor of Tom's forbidden office, the pieces of my life snapping together into a new, hideous picture. My biological parents hadn't been poor. They were wealthy. And they had loved me. They had provided for me. The Hudsons knew. They had to have known all along. Their adoption wasn't an act of mercy. It was a hostile takeover. They hadn't rescued a poor orphan. They had snagged an heiress. The Hudson Project, their fancy galas, their perfect reputation. It was all funded by my inheritance. By me. The humiliation at the gala suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. It wasn't just them being cruel for fun. It was strategic. They needed everyone in town to see me as a charity case, the girl they'd saved from nothing. If people believed that, no one would ever ask where their money really came from. A cold, clear rage I'd never felt before washed over me. I knew I couldn't confront them. They'd lie, they'd gaslight me, they'd destroy the proof. I was a kid under their roof, under their legal control. They thought I was powerless. That night, I carefully took a photo of every single page of every document with my phone. The will, the trust statements, everything. The next day, I told the Hudsons I was going to the library to study. The library was my only real sanctuary. I remembered seeing a flyer on the community board there weeks ago. Free legal aid clinic. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number. A kind voice answered. I whispered that I was a minor in a bad situation and I desperately needed to talk to a lawyer. They must have heard the panic in my voice, because they gave me an appointment for the very next afternoon. Before I continue, if you're enjoying my story, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. I met Ms. Diaz in a small, cramped office that smelled like old books and coffee. She had kind eyes but a sharp, no-nonsense vibe. She listened patiently as my story tumbled out. At first, I could see the professional skepticism on her face. A troubled teen with a wild story. She'd probably heard it all. But then I slid my phone across the desk. "I have proof," I whispered. She swiped through the photos, and her expression slowly changed. She zoomed in on the trust statements, then the will. When she finally looked up at me, the skepticism was gone. It was replaced by a look of utter shock and steely resolve. "Anna," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "what they've done isn't just morally wrong. This could be considered a massive criminal fraud." She explained it in words I could understand. Embezzlement. Breach of fiduciary duty. A fancy way of saying that as my guardians, they had a legal duty to use my money only for my benefit, not to buy themselves cars and fund their reputation. "The law provides a clear path for cases like this," she explained, cautioning that it wouldn't be simple. While reversing an adoption is legally complex and rare, courts can and will strip guardianship from parents who commit fraud or act so completely against a child's best interests. And this is one of the most outrageous cases I have ever seen. She said that the courts see public humiliation and emotional manipulation as severe forms of child abuse, which can cause long-term psychological damage. What they did wasn't just a financial crime. It was a profound betrayal of their duty as parents. She agreed to take my case pro bono. Her first move was to file an emergency petition with the family court, asking for the Hudsons to be immediately removed as my guardians and trustees. 2 days before the hearing, they were served with the court papers. I heard Tom's roar of fury all the way upstairs. They cornered me in the living room, their faces twisted with rage. "What is this? What did you do?" Sarah shrieked, waving the summons in my face. I looked her dead in the eye. My voice was steady. "I told the truth." They actually laughed. Cold, dismissive laugh. "You and what lawyer?" Tom sneered. "You have no idea what you've just done, you ungrateful little brat. We're your parents. No judge is going to listen to you. We'll see you in court." They were so arrogant, so sure of their social standing, that they truly believed they were untouchable. They had no idea I wasn't just coming to court with a story. I was coming with a receipt for every single one of their sins. The courtroom was intimidating. All dark wood and high ceilings. Felt like a place where lives were permanently changed. Tom and Sarah sat at their table with a slick, expensive-looking lawyer. They looked perfect, like worried, loving parents who had been wrongly accused. Sarah would occasionally dab a dry eye with a handkerchief. It was all theater. They glanced at me with pity, as if I were a confused child who'd gotten them into this mess. I sat next to Ms. Diaz, a thick binder on the table between us. My hands were clammy, but my mind was like steel. Judge Miller was an older man with a stern face and a reputation for being tough but fair. He read over the initial petition, his expression impossible to read. The Hudsons' lawyer went first. He painted me as a troubled, deceitful teenager, prone to drama. He described the Hudsons as saints who had given me everything. The gala, he argued, was a light-hearted roast that I had tragically misinterpreted because of my deep-seated issues. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if the judge might actually buy it. Then Ms. Diaz stood up. The whole vibe of the room shifted. She was calm, precise, and absolutely lethal. "Your Honor," she began, "we are not here to discuss hurt feelings or teenage drama. We are here because for the past 6 years, a criminal enterprise has been operating under the guise of a loving adoption." The Hudson's lawyer leaped to his feet. "Objection. That's an outrageous claim." "Is it?" Ms. Diaz replied coolly. "Then I invite you to explain the contents of this binder." She placed the binder on the judge's bench. "This isn't about a party, Your Honor. This is about fraud, embezzlement, and a level of emotional abuse that is frankly shocking. This is the story of how 2 people systematically looted a child's multi-million-dollar inheritance to build themselves a life of luxury." She walked Judge Miller through it, page by page. My parents' will. The trust statements. Then, she laid out the Hudson's financial records right next to my trust's withdrawal statements. A vacation to Europe for them. A $10,000 withdrawal from my trust. A new Mercedes. A $50,000 withdrawal. A $500,000 donation to launch the Hudson Project. A $500,000 withdrawal from my trust right before it. It was a clear, undeniable paper trail. The color drained from the Hudsons' faces. The final nail in the coffin was a short audio recording I'd made on my phone the night they were served the papers. Sarah's voice shrieking. "After everything we've done for you, we could have left you to rot in that system. You should be thanking us." Then Tom's voice, full of contempt. "This money, we earned it. We spent 6 years raising you. That was the price." A dead silence fell over the courtroom. The Hudsons were frozen, their masks completely shattered. But all eyes were on Judge Miller. He was staring at the papers, his face ashen. This was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, but this was different. He slowly lifted his head and looked at Tom and Sarah, and his hands, resting on the binder, were visibly trembling. It wasn't with weakness. It was with pure, unfiltered rage. When he spoke, his voice was low, shaking with a fury that seemed to make the air vibrate. "In 25 years on this bench," he said, dangerously quiet, "I have seen greed. I have seen cruelty. But I have never seen predators disguise themselves so completely as saviors." He looked right at them. "You didn't rescue this child. You hunted her. You found a vulnerable orphan with a fortune, and you took her in not to give her a home, but to rob her blind. And your charity," he said the word like it was poison, "was just a stage for your own vanity, funded by money you stole from the very child you paraded around as your trophy." He picked up his gavel. "The public humiliation she endured wasn't a roast. It was a desperate act to reinforce your lie. You didn't just steal her money. You tried to steal her identity and her worth." The Hudson's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge cut him off with a single glare. "I am issuing the following orders, effective immediately," he boomed. "First, the parental rights of Thomas and Sarah Hudson are hereby suspended, pending a final hearing for permanent termination. Second, I am ordering a freeze on all assets, bank accounts, and properties belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Hudson, pending a full forensic audit. Third, I am issuing an emergency protective order. You will not come within 500 feet of this young woman. You will not contact her, directly or indirectly, ever." He paused, his eyes sweeping over their horrified faces. "And finally," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "I am referring this entire case file to the district attorney's office with my strongest recommendation for a full criminal investigation." He slammed the gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. It was over. The Hudson's empire, their reputation, their entire world, dismantled in less than 10 minutes. I sat there, next to Ms. Diaz, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt the crushing weight on my chest begin to lift. I took a deep breath, and the air tasted like freedom. The judge looked over at me, the fury in his eyes softening for just a moment. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice now steady, "welcome back." The news ripped through Maple Creek like a storm. The saviors were villains. Their friends vanished, their names were stripped from the plaques, and their project was exposed as a total sham. They eventually faced multiple felony charges and lost everything. But their story wasn't my concern anymore. With Ms. Diaz's help, I started to piece together the life that was stolen from me. I learned about my real parents, David and Eleanor Vance. They were brilliant architects who had loved me more than anything. Their will wasn't just about money. It was filled with their hopes and dreams for me. They wanted me to travel, to create, to be happy. I'm not Anna Hudson anymore. I am Anna Vance. I'm not a project or a charity case. I'm the daughter of David and Eleanor. I'm the keeper of their legacy and the architect of my own future. The house I live in now isn't a cage. It's a home I'm filling with my own art and my own quiet, joyful peace. The past will always be part of my story, but it no longer defines me. They thought mocking me was the end of my story. They were wrong. It was just the beginning. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.